Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap, as well as end of the week market recap for Friday, October 25th. We've got basically one more week. Actually, I think it's 4 more trading days to go for the month of October, and then we'll be on to November. Now, before I get into the seasonality and all that, risk disclaimer in front of you, everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only. So, yes, once we get through, I think there's a few things that are going to be on the horizon for the next week or two. And I think if you have the right perspective and don't get really aggravated with price action like today, which was up, down, and that's kind of how the week was, up, down, up, down, up, down. If you can kind of make it through here, maybe, try to collect, try to make a little bit of money. I've talked about, I give a lot of baseball analogies sometimes, and with the World Series starting tonight, it's probably a good time. If I'm going to ever do baseball analogies, like this would be the right time to do it. But I think when if you take the perspective of what you're trying to accomplish right now, and it's more of base hits. I think with the price action that you're getting around earnings, right? You're getting some names that are just blasting off to the upside. Also, if some names missed on earnings, they're getting pretty punished to the downside too. So if you happen to catch, a couple of these names and you're taking some, the right type of risk, whether it's using a call spread or a put spread, right, or having a little bit of exposure to a name, right, that's where the alpha is generated in this type of a market. And Deckers was a good example of that too. Tesla, obviously, a good example of that too. But that's where the money's being made right now. And also, basically taking note of, and this is what I do, is I put together a list of all the names that are showing strong earnings, and just having those names ready and monitoring those names, because I do feel, as I say in a lot of these videos, that those are going to be your leaders for the next quarter, right? You talk about many times when a name gaps up and it has a better than expected quarter, institutions are going to be forced to go out and buy that name after earnings, right? And that's often why that a name will do very well over that quarter. It's that new information. It's the same thing on the flip side. If a name really does not impress and acts very poorly, it's going to be what I refer to as dead money for the quarter. And we see that time and time again. Now, it's not 100% of the time. A company can come out in between the next time that they report earnings, and they can give updated guidance. They can come out with a new product that can turn things around. But for the most part, and I'm going to show you a chart in just a second. But I think ultimately, so those are the opportunities to make money as we're going through this earnings season, because you're going to have things like this election that's coming up, and regardless of what the outcome, it's uncertainty in the short term. So understanding that getting through this time frame is going to be important, because I think that if there is volatility around that, there will be some good buying opportunities. So you can't get overemphasize like the price action. And like, for example, for today, right, the Qs looking like they were going to resolve higher. And I even said this on Twitter earlier, midday things look pretty damn good. And it's amazing when because I do a midday note and I had to change the numbers drastically. A lot of things just went in the wrong direction. For example, yields continue to go higher. The dollar continued to go higher. So, those headwinds are persistent. They're there, and they have not really have gotten better in terms of what yields are doing. So this is the Qs, like, again, consolidating around this version point of control. It looks like they want to go higher, but they need more information. And we're going to get all of next week. We're going to get all of the big names reporting in the Qs. We didn't get that this week, right? We did get Tesla, but the rest of the names are going to be reporting next week, and that's really going to judge where this goes. So that's the main thing. Other than that, like, this is holding up I think, at least for today, and it is above the 5 period moving average. In the short term, like the short term picture, the Qs are holding up a bit better, but they're going to have to prove it with those earnings. SPY again is kind of stuck between this 5 and the 20-day moving average. It is above the value area for the month, but most likely these moving averages might crunch together, similar to in here, and there's a good chance that this could resolve higher. Right, that's what I'm looking at. IWM, which if you're a regular viewer of my videos, you know that I don't really care too much about IWM because it's very sideways. And if you're doing if your game is constantly selling the rip and buying the dip, right? You can make money in this type of trade because that's what this does. Every time it goes up a couple days, like if you're really good at hey, I'm happy and I'm taking money off the table, and then you could play the short side and play this to the downside, and you can make money on this same thing. And then you have to wait patiently for a dip into a moving average or into support, and it seems to hold. That's the story with this. That's not my typical type of trading. I do a lot of things. Like I'm a very, obviously I'm running a trading a trading service. I'm running a trading room. I'm putting out midday and end of day notes which take my attention. So I can't you need to be super fixated on this type of thing, because if you don't sell properly at the right time, you've got to shoot down to the downside, right? But if you're not doing much anything else, and you can concentrate on this, with both eyes on this type of a move, then you can perhaps trade it a little bit better. I like trends where you don't have to do too much, right? Where you basically you get into a name, you set your where you want to take targets, right? You make adjustments, of course, as you go along the way, and you have downside alerts, and you want to basically stay in a trade for as long as possible, right? A nice, neat trend, right? That's what I typically try. That's the majority of trades that I try to look for. Obviously Nvidia has been, this is one of those situations where you basically, other than like a hiccup in here, right? It's been trending for the whole month, right? And again, it's not perfect. Like even today is kind of difficult because it did not close on its highs, but ultimately I like the trades where you don't have to do much, right? Where it's a strong name and it just continues to break out and make new highs. Now, again, this has been a situation where, and again, I'm super zoomed in, but it's been a little bit easier, especially when you look at a trend like this. And when something goes like this, right? But in any event, I want to get back to what I want to speak to about the in this video. And by the way, so here's a good example. I talked about dead money, right? Well, this is exactly the story, right? Google did not have a good earnings. They did not beat their expectations. You could argue whether or not, oh, they're making money and so forth. They're continuing to make a lot of money. Okay, that's fine. But what we're talking about is expectations and whether or not they're beating their expectations. And the last quarter, they didn't do that, right? So this is a good example of dead money. Look at where, it hasn't done anything over the last 3 months, while the rest of the market has gone up. So this is, again, like a more of a textbook example of, if you do not report good earnings, there's not much that's going to happen in your stock unless, again, they're going to introduce something new, or they're going to correct it, and they're going to say, hey, we actually are growing faster than expected, right? That's the growth that you need for a growth stock. Now, the picture could change here. So this is one stock that I'm definitely watching, because regardless of what it's done over the last quarter, which is nothing, they have a chance to redeem themselves for this quarter. If they come out and they beat expectations, they're going to move pretty decently, because again, probably expectations are probably a little bit lower considering the last quarter, and they haven't done anything. Now, again, they're going to have to say something really special in the quarter. They're going to have to talk about in their conference call where they see growth, what they're doing to capture growth, what kind of new products that they've got out. But that's up to them, right? That's all we can do, is basically understand that the price action is starting to get compelling here. Now, again, I can't tell you, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what they're going to say, what their numbers are going to be, and what they're going to say. But the risk to reward is pretty good here, that if they do say something positively, the stock's probably going to do very well, right? And that's the case of Tesla too. Tesla, they had the robo taxi event. and it went south. I mean, that's how the majority of their events go, by the way, right? It's always a bit of, they buy the rumor, sell the news. Investors didn't, they were not in awe for the most part of, anything new coming out, right? They've got a multi-year plan. But the quarter for the earnings quarter, there were things, there were some more excitement about, hey, they're making money on the Cybertruck. Their margins are very good, right? And look at the stock go. Now, I think if you look at I don't know why this isn't working. Let me just pause this really quick. There we go. So I did not have a setting on properly, but this is the yearly valuary. So we're getting to the top. This is bullish 80% rule is still in play here for a move up to basically 275.53. And then we'll see, we'll see, if Tesla can move. But do you see the difference? Like, they came out and surprised, and probably the expectations were kind of low. I was more worried about the downside. I said this in yesterday's video. So in any event, this is going to be very interesting once this does get to the top of the value area. I do think it does complete this 80% rule because of all the option activity that you're seeing in this. Now there's a gamma move that's going on in the stock. So I think this is going to be very interesting. I remain long Tesla in the TTG trend portfolio, and so on and so forth. So the other thing I was going to mention, seasonality too, and that seasonality kind of lines up with the election. Once we get through this, next week or two, right, the seasonality is going to be on the side of the bulls, right? So I think that's going to be very important, and you might see better, more constructive price action than you saw this week. Here's the performance for this week. A lot of things to the downside. Look at how many groups were down well over 2% this week. The home builders were down 7%. Metals and mining were down 4%. Materials were down, right? This was bad breath this week. Couple stocks like that's why I brought up Tesla, right? And the XLY ETF was positive this week. Why was it positive this week? Because Tesla is a good portion of it has a big weight in the XLY. Semis did okay this week, right? They were trying to charge ahead today, just kind of ran out of steam. And there's too much going on for investors to embrace these moves, for some of these moves. These stories are going to remain intact, but we need to get through the election and the uncertainty out of the equation, right? And then you might see better price action, because the earnings that we've seen so far, there's been a lot of good earnings. All right. So what else did I want to cover with you? Just, I think, probably sectors, right? From where this was a week ago, there's been a heck of a lot of deterioration that has happened in the sectors. Tech, again, it's going to hinge on next week, but this looks very similar to the XLK ETF, right? Let's go through a couple of these. XLC, and I usually do this all for members over the weekend, so I'm not going to go through all of these, but it's leaning to the upside. You're going to have Meta and say Facebook. You're going to have Meta and you're going to have Google, right? They're going to be the driving factors in this ETF and in this sector, right? And if you don't believe me, here's XLC. Right, you've got Meta and you've got, you have to take these two Googles together, but this is roughly about 40% of the ETF. Netflix, of course, is in there too. They've already delivered. T-Mobile's done very well as well. So again, you're seeing some good earnings so far. You're just going to need to see good earnings out of the rest of these big companies too, and I think that will set us up pretty decently. Financials, disappointing. I don't know what the story was with financials. We've seen some really good earnings, but again, it could just be that investors are not embracing some of these trades right now. So I think you'll get better price action. And certainly we've seen some good earnings that have come from the likes of Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Raymond James, and there's probably about 4 or 5 other financials, right? But let these kind of come, the more that these, this isn't a nice uptrend, but if it comes in here, right, this is a better buying opportunity than it is up here. to me, as long as it stays in an uptrend. If we see a break of the 50-day moving average, to me, it's no longer a good buying opportunity. It means that something's not right, right? But if we're just dipping into support and it bounces on support, that's what we're looking for. All right, I'll leave it there, guys. Have a great weekend. And again, do not get this, in my opinion, do not get discouraged by the lack of breakouts, the deterioration right now. Be patient, and if I would be more concerned if the indices start really breaking down. And I understand, like, right now breadth is not good. In fact, it's kind of poor right now, but let's be patient and let's wait. Let's get into November. Let's get past the election, and let's still make notes of next week on all the earnings reports that we get, regardless of, like, that there may be lack of follow through in some of those names, but keep a list, because those will be the names that we're going to go back to, and that's what I'll be doing next week. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you on Monday.